So, Chris, what do you think makes a good suitability report template?
I think in terms of the template, it's got to be something that the end user can work with, because there's a difference between template and report. But for me, the template should leave scope for whoever's writing the report to personalize the template using soft facts as well as hard facts, so that the report is identifiable for the client. I think that's the really important thing.
Cool, thanks.
Okay. So Chris, from your time at FOS, what are some of the things that you've noticed from reports that you've read? Some of the good things, some of the bad things, just sort of things that you can just sort of point out should or shouldn't be there, really.
The classic is when I was at FOS was that complainants would say something like they didn't understand the risk of what they were doing. And if you read the report and you can't see anything about risk until maybe page 45, then I think it's a reasonable assumption to assume that the client or the complainant didn't know anything. A good, succinct report, which is about the client or the complainant, where again they're identifiable. You know, their relatives could read the report and recognise them in that report. Made it a lot easier for those reports to be defended by businesses.
So what are the benefits of having a shorter suitability report versus a longer one?
Well, I think that the thing is that you've got to bear in mind that the client is reading the report. They're not an expert. So they just want something that's going to be quite punchy and succinct and actually gets to the nub very quickly. What I think is a disadvantage of a long report is that if there's nothing about the client until, say, page 3, the first 2 pages are talking about I'm an independent financial advisor, I do this, I do that, then it's just not a good report to read. I think basically, if we're reading a report about ourselves, we want to get into the nitty-gritty very quickly.
So compliance will say that reports should be longer, but Consumer Duty says that they should be shorter. What do you think is the best way to find a middle ground?
This is an interesting one, because I've never seen the regulator say that reports should be long. In fact, the regulator says exactly the opposite. The regulator has always talked about shorter reports. In terms of the middle ground, I don't think there is a middle ground. I think we should all just be thinking about Consumer Duty and making our reports concise and to the point.
Good answer. I like that.
Yeah. So how should a paraplanner address Consumer Duty? Will it basically affect the way that a paraplanner works at all?
Well, I think that depends. And the reason why I say it depends is that I've always said and believe that paraplanners are as important, if not more important than the advisors. So a lot of the work the paraplanners do, if they're working in an effective way with the advisors, then it's pretty simple. You'll be working as a team and you'll be drilling down on Consumer Duty and making the reports short, simple and easy to understand. Where a paraplanner has a challenge is if the advisors or the advisors compliance team say reports should be long, and then I think that's the challenge. But I really do believe paraplanners can help lead the way in helping advisors understand what good looks like.
Do you think that the average client or the average consumer will notice a duty once Consumer Duty comes into play?
Well, I think the good advisors aren't really necessarily going to have to do a lot different when it comes to their reports. I also get the impression that as things stand at the moment, some advisors aren't really picking up on Consumer Duty at all. So therefore their clients won't notice any difference because the reports won't change. I think what would be good is those advisors who are in the space of recognising Consumer Duty, understanding it and doing something about it, will mean that the next time they write a report for their clients will notice a difference. And of course, the most effective way of knowing whether the report is good is ask the client, what do you think of the report? Do you understand it?
So there are some things that generally won't be documented as heavily in reports following consumer duty, such as critical yield, knowledge and experience. So why are some of these aspects no longer needed, do you think?
I don't think they were ever needed, to be honest. That's just my view. I think there's a perception that you have to throw everything in there, but the skill here is financial advisors are very qualified, very knowledgeable people, but they don't have to show their workings out to their clients. As long as their workings out are in the background and the thought process in the background, then there was never really a need to put that type of information in the report. Because let's be honest, how many average people reading reports would know about things like critical yield? Hardly any.
On that note, sorry to discuss, but I've done some reading on like the average reading age of people in the UK, and a lot of them, it can be the same as a 9-year-old, I think, for the majority of people in this country. So you use words like that, and it's just going to go well over their heads.
Absolutely. I spoke to someone 2 weeks ago. He asked me what I did for a living, and I told him, and I said, have you got a financial advisor? He said, yes. I said, do you understand the reports the advisor gives you? And he said, about 20%. I understand about 20% of that report. So the average reading age is quite an important one, because you're never really going to know about people's understanding unless you ask and get them to repeat back to you what you've put in your report to make sure that they do understand it.
Yeah.
On that subject, Hannah, I'm just going to steal the question after that one, because that one sort of goes into that one quite nicely. So how should an advisor document that the client has understood the advice and the recommendations and why it's suitable for them?
This is a massive challenge, and it's one that's being discussed openly at the moment. There are varying ways to do it. I mean, a lot of advisors are using Zoom now, so having that video conversation, that's one way of doing it. Other advisors are doing explainer videos, and then asking the clients about the video they've watched and confirm they've watched and read it and understood it. There are various ways around it, but I'm looking forward to see what the FCA says on that, because I don't think anyone at the moment has got a perfect answer to that question. But I think the easiest way that I would explain it is, I had a medical procedure a couple of weeks ago. Before I went into the theatre, I was told what was going to happen to me. When I got into the theatre, the surgeon asked me to tell him what he was going to do to me, and then he wrote down what I said. And I think that's quite a good analogy of maybe looking at the medical profession and putting it into the financial services world.
Do you think that moving towards a shorter suitability report template and focusing on consumer duty will affect the way that the overall file is completed for compliance purposes?
I hope not. I think when it comes to compliance, and I'm not a compliance expert, but when it comes to compliance, I think it's back to having a file that actually shows your workings out. So that if you are questioned by the regulator about how you did something, or by FOS about how you did something, if it's in the file, it happened. I think that's the key to it. You don't need to show how clever you are in a suitability report, but I do think the file needs to show your workings out.
So how do you think you can evidence in a report that the value is being passed on to the client, both in terms of the service being given and the recommended product or strategy?
I think value is more than that. I think value is not just around the report. Because actually, if you think about it, if I'm advocating a shorter report, then it could be seen as a shorter report means there's not so much value there.
Yeah.
But value has so many touch points when it comes to the advisor and the advisory firm, by the way, not just the advisor, the support the firm give, what the advisor does through the course of a year. Look at all the touch points and then work out how value comes into play after that. I don't think it can come down to just the report.